Hi and welcome back. This is the fifth and final paint in this surfboard series. So this painting, it's feeling pretty close to me. When I looked at it, I loved a lot of it. There was too much going on for me when I had it up in my studio and I looked at it for a few days. But I do enjoy the balance of colours, the balance of marks. I love the opacity of some of the areas next to the transparency. I'm also aware that you may not see it as clearly as what I do with the light shining on it. So I will try and put some photos up. I know it's up on social media for you to really get an idea of what it looks like when it's standing up and the light's not so bright on it. But for me, I'm feeling close. So as I went into this paint, while I let it go and I don't know if it's going to complete, I do know that there is a lot that I'm loving. There's a lot that this painting is giving me that I wanted it to do, which was this complexity of the story of beach in my life. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I had the intention of what it was going to be about. And that's, as you would have seen if you've been with me across the series of 5, it's created lots of challenges and toing and froing and the painting nearly getting there and then me going over areas. I appreciate you being here and sticking with me. It's very vulnerable, me showing you the different things that I do in these processes and the challenges that I have along the way, and how much paint I can put down on a surface. And that's okay. I want to be very real about my process with you. I do want to demystify what it can be like. It's not always just, 5 moves from the beginning of a canvas to ending it. But I think that in sticking with it and trusting the messy bits and trusting the process, you can get a really complex and rich story that can come from that process. And more than that, what the painting actually gives you in return. This painting has really been a beautiful process for me in the memories it evoked, the stories, just the painting of it in itself was almost therapeutic for me. I'd be really interested to know about your practice and if you have that sense of what painting and the process of painting does for you. And if you can get to the end of painting quite a complex painting and see the different stages it's taken you through and what you may have learned from it, learned about yourself from it. Because ultimately that's the painting for me is it's learning about myself. It's learning about my life. It's learning about my preferences. It's learning about the lessons that life's brought me over my life. It shows me about how I can stay solid and I can trust and I can have faith in myself. And in sharing my process, it shows me how I can be very vulnerable and show up anyway. So here I am creating the zones I told you about before, all the small stories. And the challenge is just having the right amount on the surfboard so that you look and can see, but there's not too much. If I look across this board and I know how bright and vibrant the colours are, it can be a lot. There's a lot going on. So this paint for me is going to be a little bit about being about really deciding on what's important in the story and what I can let go of so that the story is not too much. It's quite an interesting thing when I think about this, because I would often say that the idea of the too muchness has been a story of my life, and of my art, and learning that to really tell a story sometimes requires you to to be really specific about what that story, which bits are really important in the story, because if it's all there, if everything's there, then in a way nothing is, nothing gets seen. So selecting, where do I want the story to be seen, which parts of the story really need to be seen, and which bits can afford to go for the sake of the bigger story. So I think that's where I'm up to. And so, you know what, I'm going to say that probably in these final stages is where I do think I bring in my brain, my critical brain, a little bit more, because I'm really wanting to discern what's important in the overall picture. What bits do I really now want to be there? And where have I, in bringing in my critical brain, where am I going to lose the feeling of looseness and freedom that I want the painting to have as well? So it's an interesting balance in these last few layers of not losing the energy of a piece. And, I think in this painting, I've moved between that, having energy and then losing it and bringing it back. And there's a certain amount of letting go that really has to happen when you're trying to bring energy into the finer layers, because you can lose the energy if you're too practiced and too neat, at least for me in the process that I have. And I think I start painting a little bit smaller so that I'm telling the small stories. And the small stories on this board might be a little bit too subtle to see in this light, which is why I'll invite you to go to my Instagram page and have a look, because it's in all those light areas, there is a lot of complexity in the light areas. I will try and take a video, a close-up video of it all, so that you can really get a sense of what layered paintings can do if you stick with them. Because even when I paint over an area like that, there's a lot of the paint from underneath that still shows through. A lot of the brush strokes. I love seeing the layers underneath the brush strokes. Everyone's different in this. I teach a lot of students who don't like the brush strokes. And that's something that you really need to discern for yourself. Do I like this? So often you like things in other people's works that you maybe don't like when you paint it yourself. But for me, I really enjoy seeing the brush strokes in my work and the layers underneath and the bits that stay, that don't get hidden, even if most of it gets hidden, that all of it doesn't. And you'll see me working with a lot of the lighter layers, and covering up areas, which I've done a lot with this because, as I say, on these paintings, what's really challenging is knowing what you want to keep and what you're, to tell the bigger story, what you're willing to let go of. And that's what I'm going through right now. And doing it a way that looks interesting, doesn't look like you've just covered over, that there's actually interest in the way that you've done it. So the white colours for me, or it's not actually white, it's a very, very light. The way that I put this on there to tell part of the story and also to give breathing space is really important. And also, as you can see me, I painted over that area a fair amount. It's actually been a really interesting, there's often a spot in a painting that, and being the middle place in a painting where I just painted over with that light colour can be quite challenging because it's really linking the painting. But also it can be me going over an area a few times can be about me trying to get a real opacity to the paint. On the surfboard surface, when you have a lot of paint on there, it can take quite a bit of paint to get a really nice, punchy, opaque area. So I can come over the same area a fair amount to get that real intense, opaque, light area. Putting back layers of story into the areas that I'm enjoying the stories being. I'm getting pretty close. I'm loving the different levels of complexity in those green areas and in those pink areas. There's lots of different marks, and it's like going to the same beach over many, many years and the different experiences that you have on that one beach. It requires there to be a different level of, if you look at that pink area over on the right-hand side of the board, so many different stories that I see in that. It's so complex over a lifetime of going to this to the same beach many, many times, or different ones. And that's similar to what I'm doing in the light areas. There's a story coming through in those light areas that is so subtle, but for me is so important to get in there. For the subtle stories to be as important as the bold stories, as they so often are. It's a slightly different colour. It's a brighter red, but it's just adding a bit of punch in that area. Adding a bit of depth to that pink. I'm enjoying how that pink story goes across the painting from one end to the other, but in totally different ways. And in going over the pink with a transparent paint, just adds to the depth and to the colour. And being transparent, look at the marks the history of marks that are there that comes back through. I'm being quite discerning in this paint. I know I'm close. And that can be a clue. People often ask me, how do you know when a painting's close? And for me, it can be in how small, how much more practiced I get in how I put paint on. You know, I'm looking over those pink areas, which is where the eye's going to, and I'm really loving the complexity of those areas. You know, they're all a similar color, but because of the layers of transparent and opaque and the layers that come through in that, they tell such an interesting story for me. And I'm bringing now a transparent but deep green to do a similar thing in the darker areas. Don't know if you saw the change then that happened. I left it to dry for a bit and the light changed. So I did paint this area earlier with an opaque colour, and I've done a similar shape there before which I liked but just didn't come out the way I wanted it to. A real dramatic brush strokes that I wanted to balance at the bottom there that speak across the whole painting. And then bringing a little bit of that across the other side. And again, getting a chunkier colour in that middle section as a bridge between the two sides. It's fun looking back over a painting like this and to know what it felt like to paint it, and then to give a mental view of what it was like, and to think through the balance that I know is going through in my head at this point. It's at this point that I think a lot of my graphic design brain also comes in just with those bits of balancing all the stories and bringing in the looseness. And you know, I really did enjoy that spray paint feeling and just bringing in a little bit of that at the end. Bringing back that yellowy colour, which is reflected in some of the light colours that maybe it loses a little bit in the brightness that comes in from above. But I've put a bit more complexity into that yellow in this particular one. It's a little bit of a dirtier yellow. Almost has a little bit more of a seriousness about it. Camera's doing a little bit of a dance. I think it can sense that I'm feeling close. As you can see, I've really taken out, well, when I say taken out, I've really used the light colours to tell a secondary story and the bright colours to tell a primary story. So you go between the two, and you go between the colour blocking to guide you through the painting and to guide you through the stories of my life at the beach. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I would really love to hear your comments on this process, because it's been quite a different one to show. And whether this inspires you to paint on surfboards or skateboards or any number of different things, I would love to hear what different substrates you use. I would really appreciate you sharing my channel or subscribing to my channel and asking any questions and also commenting on the videos. It's been a really fun one for me to share. I don't do surfboards very often. It's maybe one a year. So this one I'm loving. I've got it up in my studio and it's one of my favorites. I'll have to think of a name for it, but at the moment it's my life at the beach. Thank you so much.